French defense.
e4, e6, d4, d5.
A solid opening in which black usually gets a somewhat cramped but firm position. The shortcoming of this opening is that in some variations the black c8 bishop is locked up behind the black pawn chain. On the other hand, the active counterplay in the center bound up with the move c5 gives black good counter chances. The white e4 pawn is under attack, but the exchange by 3, e-equal d5 is possible, as well as the 3, e5 advance. White also can protect it by 3, coup de c3 or 3, coup de d2. These are the four main variations of the French defense. 1. Exchange variation.
E takes d5. E takes d5.
In the exchange variation there arises a symmetrical position where it is hard for either side to hope for an advantage.
Bishop d3. Knight c6. c3. Bishop d6. Queen f3. Bishop e6. Knight e2. Queen d7. Bishop f4. Knight g e7. Bishop takes d6. Queen takes d6. Queen g3. Queen takes g3.
Even play.
e4. e6. d4. d5.
2. Nimzowitsch advanced variation.
e5. c5. c3. Queen b6.
This move deserves attention. Black retains pressure on the white d4 pawn and also sets the white b2 pawn on b2 as a target. Thus the development of white's pieces on the queenside, the c1 bishop and the b1 knight, is contained. The emergence of the black queen in the early stage of the opening is fully justified in this case, the more so since white cannot attack the queen on b6.
Knight f3. Knight c6.
The move
b3.
is bad because of
c takes d4. c takes d4. Bishop b4. Check. Bishop d2. Knight takes d4. a3.
White is going to continue with 7, b4 breaking free of the unpleasant pressure. However, black hampers this.
a5. Bishop d3.
While developing pieces, white sets a trap, an attempt at winning the d4 pawn by
c takes d4. c takes d4. Knight takes d4. Knight takes d4. Queen takes d4.
will result in a queen loss after.
Bishop b5. Check. Bishop d7. Short castle.
White sacrifices a pawn for the initiative.
c takes d4. c takes d4. Knight takes d4. Knight takes d4. Queen takes d4. Knight c3.
Capturing yet another pawn.
Queen takes e5. Rook e1. Queen d6. Knight b5.
With a powerful attack.
Queen b6. Queen e2.
White has the initiative, which compensates for the sacrificed pawn.
e4. e6. d4. d5.
3. Winnower variation.
Knight c3.
It is possible to play
Knight f6. Bishop b4. e5. c5. a3. Bishop takes c3. Check. b takes c3. Knight e7. a4. Knight b c6. Knight f3. Queen A5, E4, E6, D4, D5,
4 Tarrasch variation 3. Coup de D2.
Knight D2.
Though with this move black forms an isolated pawn, nonetheless this is the best possibility simplifying the position and promoting the development of black pieces. Other continuations here.
Knight F6, E5, Knight F D7, F4,
Or,
Knight C6, Knight G F3, Knight F6, E5, Knight D7, Bishop B5,
lead to more complicated play but give black cramped position.
C5, E takes D5, E takes D5,
In regard to capturing on D5 with the queen c the Stein, Ullmann game.
Knight G F3,
Here also,
Knight C6,
is played but after.
Bishop B5,
It is more difficult for black to defend. For instance,
Bishop D6, Short Castle, Knight G E7, D takes C5, Bishop takes C5, Knight B3, Bishop B6, Bishop E3, Bishop takes E3, Bishop takes C6, check. Knight takes C6, Rook E1, B takes C6, F takes E3,
and white exerts strong pressure on the dark squares.
Knight F6, Bishop B5, check. Bishop D7, Bishop takes D7, check. Knight B takes D7, Short Castle, Bishop E7, D takes C5, Knight takes C5.
Chances of both sides are approximately even. The d5 pawn helps black to control the central points c4 and e4. Stein, Ullmann, Moscow, 1967.
E4, E6, D4, D5, Knight D2, C5, E takes D5, Queen takes D5.
Capture with the pawn is more reliable. By using the queen black lags behind in development and has to play further with great precision.
Knight G F3.
This temporary pawn sacrifice is the best continuation. White manages to develop his forces fast.
C takes D4, Bishop C4, Queen D6, Short Castle.
Black cannot retain his pawn on d4. If
E5,
there would follow, of course,
Knight takes E5, Queen takes E5, Rook E1. Knight F6, Knight B3, Knight C6, Knight B takes D4, Knight takes D4, Knight takes D4, Bishop E7, B3.
white brings his bishop out on the long diagonal to join in the attack onto black's k side. Better is
Short Castle, Bishop B2, Bishop D7,
winding up the development.
A6,
A needless move.
Bishop B2, Short Castle, Queen F3, Queen c7, Rook f e1, b5.
True enough, it is now unprofitable for white to play.
Queen takes a8,
Because of
Bishop b7, Queen a7, Rook a8,
winning the queen. In the case of
Knight takes e6,
there follows,
Queen c6,
but black is chasing the white bishop where it wants to go itself. 14. Gauge d7 would be better and the black bishop would protect the important point e6.
Bishop d3,
A faulty plan.
Bishop b7, Queen h3, g6.
Black is compelled to weaken the k side because of the threat. 17. Kuda pukul b5 a pukul b5 18. Gauge pukul f6.
a4,
But he cannot play.
b4, Knight takes e6,
Due to
f takes e6, Queen takes e6, check, Rook f7, Bishop c4,
and white has two extra pawns since in the case of
Rook a f8,
there may follow either or
Queen takes e7, Bishop takes f6, b takes a4,
this exchange is not, of course, favorable for black.
Rook takes a4,
Better is
Queen b6, Knight h5,
black underestimates the impact of the ensuing sacrifice.
Knight takes e6, f takes e6, Queen takes e6, check, Rook f7, Bishop c4,
More persistent would be,
Bishop d6,
after which white could continue.
Queen h3,
Threatening 23, Mentary c3.
Bishop f8, Rook a5,
White threatens 24, Benteng pukul h5 with an irresistible attack, and if
Queen takes a5,
there follows,
Bishop takes f7, check, King takes f7, Queen e6, mate. Queen f4,
this loses at once.
Queen takes f7, check, Queen takes f7, Rook takes e7,